An association over 2,000 state legislators wants to take the politics out of pension fund investing. The American Legislative Exchange Council says state pension funds are investing your money in businesses not for financial reasons, but to advance political objectives. It's come up with a new framework to prevent state funds from engaging in so-called ESG investing, that stands for environmental, social, and governance-based decision-making. Quote, politically motivated investing is what ALEC's Jonathan Williams calls it. I asked him to explain.
Well, we've seen really a proliferation of many activist-type investor ideas go across many of the progressive-leaning states, at least in recent years, meaning that they're taking people's hard-earned retirement dollars in public sector defined benefit pension plans, so for police and fire, for teachers, for state employees. And in many cases, those funds are being used to divest or invest in politically based causes versus investments, let's say, that would maximize long-term rates of return. And Paul, as you and I have talked many times, these unfunded liabilities that are building in the states and have been for many, many years, we document that at ALEC every single year, the trillions in unfunded liabilities. Guess what? This politically based investing scheme that's out there in many places now is only making these unfunded liabilities that much worse, and of course hurting workers and retirees and hurting all of us as taxpayers who will be expected to pick up the tab when these bills come due.
What are some of the standout examples of this politically motivated investing?
Well, historically, going back a couple of decades, there was the movement in the late 1990s and early 2000s to divest from tobacco-related stocks. And we saw, for instance, I think California was one of the main examples of that. And California pension systems lost hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion or more, in foregone returns after they divested from tobacco stocks. And more recently, there's been the push, let's say, in states like New York, I believe Maine, or Vermont, and several others, to look at divesting from oil and gas stocks or coal or anything that's fossil fuel based. And then you combine that with efforts, let's say, to go after any other politically targeted industry, whether that is in an anti-gun state to go after gun manufacturers or anything that might run countercultural to that prevailing state capital's politics.
So how do you handle funds that don't want to invest somewhere like Russia or China for obvious reasons?
Well, I think that's a totally different question when it comes to policy, and it's something that we have written about, let's say, for years at ALEC. We have a whole publication called Keeping Politics Out of Pensions, where we really focus the attention on these politically motivated investment schemes that we're talking about today as it relates to going after fossil fuel, going after gun manufacturers, going after tobacco-based stocks. Having a national security-based discussion is a very different topic, and it's something that if a nation is deemed as an enemy of the United States or as a terrorist nation, that's a totally legitimate conversation around states divesting their pensions from those for national security reasons. What we're talking about is pure politics, and whether that is being played against one industry or another or one individual company in some cases, that's a very different story.
This type of activist investing, you think it comes from ideologies within the funds themselves? Does it come from political pressure?
I think it comes from many sources, right? And in some cases that the legislators promoting this type of legislation in some of the states I talked about, like New York and Vermont and Maine and others, are being pushed by maybe constituents from the far left in their districts. Also, you have the scenario where you have states that have internal money managers that may be putting their personal political views, let's say, ahead of the long-term rates of return on the investment funds. Or in some cases, states contract out management of their pension investments. And you may have the outside money managers who have a stated goal of producing some sort of non-financial return, read politics in many cases into the scenario, and they dictate that and will go forward and take those strategies forward from their outside investment perspective. So these threats do come from multiple sources, and I think it's really a huge issue in that there are trillions of dollars at stake here that states have under management in their pension systems. And if somebody doesn't address this, I think this problem only gets worse, not better.